How do you turn what you're learning into original ideas? If you're anything like me, you probably spend a lot of time reading, listening to podcasts, and watching videos to expand your mind. But the moment you try to share what you've learned, you get stuck. You struggle to articulate your thoughts. Everything sounds regurgitated, and for some reason, you can't remember anything from all the hours of content you consumed. Let me introduce you to the illusion of competence. It's that awkward moment when you fumble to tell a friend about the new book you're reading and you have to say, the author explains it way better. It feels like you know the material, but it's nothing more than loose memories. This happens because of a few mental shortcuts our brains take. When you repeatedly come across information, it becomes familiar to you, creating a sense of comfort with the material. But because all this information is being consumed passively, it's easy to overestimate how deeply you understand the subject. Without deep insight, it's impossible to develop original ideas in a unique perspective. Today, I'll share the 3 I's of insight: input, integration, and ideation. This simple framework helps turn what you're learning into unique perspectives you can clearly articulate. That way you can be more confident when sharing your ideas and stop forgetting everything you've learned. Insight requires good inputs. The body needs healthy foods and regular exercise to function at a high level. Athletes train, eat nutrient-rich foods, and put in hours of practice to excel. Being a creator is like being a cognitive athlete. It requires mental exercise and nutrient-dense information to feed the mind. A healthy information diet will produce robust and creative ideas. The information age is an amazing time in human history for curious individuals, but a dangerous time for our fickle attention spans. You can doom scroll an endless supply of viral political rants, or you can listen to a 2-hour podcast with Chris Langan, the world's smartest man alive. The ease of access to information is both a blessing and a curse for curating a healthy diet of inputs. But if you want to consume like a creator and be the one contributing ideas to digital society, then treat your inputs like an athlete would treat their body. Read often and read widely. Books are the most nutrient-dense sources of information available. They contain a lifetime of wisdom, experience, and research distilled down to its most essential parts, saving you countless hours of legwork to understand. What takes an author years to write takes a few hours to read. If you're truly serious about developing ideas and a unique perspective, then reading books is an absolute priority over the other sources of information. Like any habit worth building, reading consistently leads to compounding results over time. The more you read, the more ideas you're going to have. The key to developing a solid reading habit is to read things you're genuinely interested in. Don't feel like you need to read a book just because everyone else is hyping it up. If anything, reading the same source material as everyone else will lead to more generic ideas because we're inherently influenced by the information we consume. The more obscure your sources, the more original your ideas will seem. Another important factor in developing original ideas is to read from a variety of sources. Reading a broad range of topics from different authors will provide you with tons of creative material to work with. I like to do something called the 3-book method. What I like to do is get 3 different books on a topic I'm interested in learning more about. One that's an easy lift book that introduces me to the topic in an engaging way. One history book to learn more about the timeline of ideas, provide historical context. And then one technical book that is more actionable and nuts and bolts in its approach. For example, recently I decided to make a conscious effort to elevate my graphic design knowledge and bought 3 books. Thinking and Type by Ellen Lupton. It was a fun and engaging introduction to the use of typography and design. It had lots of pictures and was easy to jump into. Then I got the ABCs of Triangle, Square, and Circle. This was a collection of essays and a history of Bauhaus and its impact on design theory. A little more challenging to read, but gave me good historical context. And lastly, I got Grid Systems and Graphic Design. Now this book was very technical with lots of examples of how to design with mathematical precision. All 3 books deepened my understanding of graphic design, but more importantly, gave me multiple perspectives to learn from. You want to learn from many different sources because the way one person teaches something might unlock an insight for you that someone else couldn't. It also ensures your ideas aren't coming from a single person, making you less likely to sound like a cheap copycat. Instead, you'll have multiple references, opposing opinions to sift through, and your own perspective to combine into something unique. Other great inputs are podcasts, YouTube videos, and educational courses. As a general rule of thumb, limit your intake of junk food for the brain and push yourself to maintain a healthy information diet. Reading and inputting information is a great place to start, but it's still a passive learning experience. To make it stick, you'll need to take action. Insight requires integration. Most people take notes wrong. They type while listening to a lecture, they highlight everything in their books in hopes that they'll remember, they transcribe material word for word without filtering through their own lens. These strategies misunderstand how the brain learns and retains information. If you're listening while typing to a video tutorial, then your brain is being forced to rapidly context switch. The problem is our brain can only perform one cognitive task at a time. So you're either listening or you're typing. It can't be both. Highlighting and taking word-for-word notes are a bad method for a different reason. They're passive methods of memorization. A highlight doesn't require any effort. Copying text onto a page can be done mindlessly. There's a well-known pattern in memory loss called the forgetting curve. Essentially, this graph just shows we forget everything almost as fast as we learn it. Research has shown the best way to counteract the forgetting curve and retain information is to use active recall. Now, this is a crucial point to understand because it helps explain why all your highlighting, note-taking, and reading haven't made you an expert yet. Without struggling to remember or recall the facts in your own words, the information doesn't stick. So, what's the right way to take notes that actually last in your memory? Taking notes the smart way. Neuroplasticity is the physical rewiring of your brain as it learns new information. Integration of new knowledge into existing networks require deep focus, not passive osmosis. Action-based behavior change and new lines of questioning are the only way to form these new bonds. So first, you want to give your full attention to what you're consuming so your brain can comprehend the material and create new connections. Then, you want to write down everything you remember about what you just consumed. This forces you to actively recall what you just learned, immediately strengthening your neural pathways. To truly integrate the information into your knowledge base, ask yourself some questions about what you're learning. What does this idea remind you of? How does it relate to something else you've learned about? What could it lead to? And how could it be wrong? The most important thing is to take these notes in your own words, the way you remembered them. This will guarantee that when you go to create a piece of content, you're using your words and not those of the creator. You can go back and make sure you captured everything you needed from the content, but only after you've gone through this process of active recall. It's going to make your ability to memorize things so much stronger. Now, to make developing original ideas easier, you want to build a library of notes that are searchable, easy to reference, and summarize in your own words. The specific note-taking app you use doesn't really matter, but I use Notion for everything I work on, from research to writing to organizing YouTube videos and daily journaling. Notion works for me, but apps like Evernote or Obsidian are excellent for organizing your notes so long as you keep them all in one place. Over time, you'll start amassing a massive collection of messy notes that are scatterbrained and hard to reference quickly. To make these notes more useful to your creative process, take the time to clean them up and summarize them. There's a method called progressive summarization that I picked up from Tiago Forte's book, Building a Second Brain. There are 3 steps to progressive summarization. The first is to go through and bold or highlight any key points. Then you want to create bullet points and headers. This makes notes more skimmable, it creates a visual hierarchy for notes, and it becomes easier to search for specific information when you're skimming through them. Lastly, you want to summarize the document in a few sentences or paragraphs in your own words. Now, this last step has several benefits. When you want to create a new piece of content, you can quickly search for your notes, copy-paste large sections into your rough draft, and be confident that you're not plagiarizing, because all the summaries are written in your own words. This makes writing first drafts exponentially easier to start, and we all know starting is the hardest part. Instead of staring at a blank page, you're staring at paragraphs of thoughtful notes curated by your unique interests. It also ensures your notes are useful instead of wasting away in some archive, unable to be found when you need them. Creators who don't take notes the smart way, or even take notes at all, fail to remember things and end up struggling with imposter syndrome. Since they haven't interacted with the ideas on a deeper level or taken notes in their own words, they regurgitate the same information with no unique perspective. Only once you've integrated an idea through your personal filter will you be confident it's coming from you. Insight requires ideation. The creative act is a process of generating new actions with acquired knowledge. The first thing I do after summarizing my notes is create a list of plausible action steps. This gets my brain to start thinking in action. Things like next steps, experiments, content ideas, new behaviors, study and practice exercises. I'm always asking myself, what can I do with this information? New knowledge leads to new behaviors, and new behaviors lead to new knowledge. Lived experience through experimentation is how you develop unique perspectives and original ideas. You can't just imagine new ideas without actively learning and iterating with your methods. These experiences unlock new connections that would otherwise be hidden from you. That being said, there are some practical ways to share what you've learned through your original perspective. The first is to make it personal. The easiest way to put your own spin on an idea is to filter it through your own life experiences. This is what YouTuber Ali Abdaal has leaned into to become one of the largest educational channels on the platform. Here's a quote from one I saw on a podcast one time. What I've come to realize is that as long as I've taken an idea from somewhere and I can apply a personal story or anecdote from my own life, it changes into something original. There are no unique messages, only unique messengers. So you don't have to be a thought leader generating world-changing ideas. Simply apply what you've learned to your own life and share that message with others. If it's filtered through your own experience, then by definition, it's original. There's only one of you. The second thing you could do is change the frame. Problems and goals provide the frame through which ideas are understood. To transform what you're learning into something novel, ask yourself how the idea can be applied to a different goal. Take health, for instance. Most people know that 8 hours of sleep, a healthy diet, and 30 minutes of daily exercise lead to a good, long, healthy life. But what else could it be good for? That question led Dr. Wendy Suzuki to investigate the links between fitness and cognitive health after realizing she felt mentally sharp after adopting a new workout routine. Due to her research, she discovered that regular exercise strengthens the hippocampus, which is the brain region responsible for memory. A more developed hippocampus means a stronger memory, enhanced creative imagination, and reduced risk of Alzheimer's. Now, most people take information at face value in the context it was initially learned, but changing the frame and asking where else the idea could lead or how it could apply to something else is how you'll find yourself down the rabbit hole of new ideas. Change the frame and follow your curiosity towards original perspectives. Another method is to bridge the islands. The hardest part about all this is the actual writing process, where you're putting all the fragments of knowledge together into something coherent for an audience. David Perell, writer and host of the podcast How I Write, likens this process to an archipelago. All your notes, ideas, and inklings are like a bunch of tiny islands separated by a body of water. All you're trying to do as a writer is connect them by building bridges. If you've been taking notes the way I talked about earlier, this becomes exponentially easier. For this video, I decided on the framing first. Then I gathered my summarized notes, copied and pasted a few chunks into a document, and that formed my initial outline. At that point, it was just a bunch of small, unconnected islands on a page. To help bridge that gap, I developed the 3 Eyes of Insight framework. Now, this wouldn't have been possible if I sat down in a vacuum and tried to invent something new. Original frameworks are created over time through lived experience and understanding the problems you're trying to solve. More importantly, ideas become easier to explain the more you try to articulate them. My favorite part about writing is you can't get away with illogical thinking. Once strung together, sentences will either make sense or sound like madness. It forces you to think deeply about the ideas you're trying to work with. Writing is a tool for learning as much as it is for creation. Lastly, don't be afraid to use other ideas for inspiration. The 3 Eyes of Insight were inspired by the Collect, Connect, and Create framework, which I love, but it didn't quite encapsulate how I see the creative act. The word idea comes from the ancient Greek root word idein, meaning to see. Through input, integration, and ideation, you're not just collecting information, you're sharing how you see the world through your unique lens. All that's left is to create that vision.